Welcome to Art Ed Radio, the podcast for art teachers. This show is produced by the Art of Education, and I'm your host, Andrew McCormick. I think I'll spare you all from the introduction that I really want to unleash on this podcast, which is me singing a few bars from David Bowie's classic Changes, and instead I'll just lay this out there. Every year of teaching is a whole new adventure. Whether it's something as simple as a new group of students to new coworkers, new administrators, or new educational directives that we have to follow, those are things that we as art teachers, we can't control. Now, many of us veteran teachers will have some control over changes that we've made, like moving to teach in a new district, or maybe staying in the same district, but jumping to a new age group or a different building in that district. You know the adage, right? That the grass isn't always greener on the other side? There's this brisk realization that as a veteran teacher, we've stepped into a less than ideal situation, and that can be really sobering. We've been around long enough to know that there might be better solutions out there, but we don't want to be that teacher who just won't shut up about how things were done so much better at the old school. And to be honest, how much of that is looking back in time with rose-colored glasses? So that's what we're looking at today. How to make the best of a bad situation. When you realize that you've bitten off a little bit more than you can chew, that you've inherited a room and a job that you know is going to be a tough fit for you. I had the opportunity to talk shop with resident Art of Education instructor Molly Wiste.
My name is Molly Wiste, and I teach high school art in Minnesota.
And like me, Molly has recently changed roles but has stayed in the same district. Despite the fact that we are both veteran teachers, there are some challenges that we're both facing, and she was able to come in and chat with me, and I think we both kind of bolstered each other up and let each other know that it was going to be all right.
Even though you're a veteran teacher, if you find yourself in a situation where you feel like you bit off more than you can chew or you're kind of in over your head, my advice would be don't be afraid to ask for help and seek out help.
As veteran teachers, we have both the curse and blessing of experience and a little bit of wisdom. We know that we can do this job, but we also might feel like we've been doing it too long to have to deal with huge classroom management shifts and classroom supply woes, either way too much accumulated junk or not enough stuff. I think this whole problem, it really boils down to time. And we can remember back to being a new teacher and think about how challenging that first year was and how each year after that gets better and better. It's just like that. A tough situation and a tough job is just going to take time to make better. I think the biggest challenge in changing to a new position is that classroom management shift. Either the former teacher was way too strict and drove students away like the plague, or way too lenient and kids just ran roughshod over the entire room. Both of those things are challenging in their own unique ways. And that's why I think taking a class like the Art of Education's Managing the Art Room would be so helpful. Even seasoned teachers would benefit from a dynamic learning environment where you can learn alongside of other teachers and classmates from around the country. Managing the Art Room is just a 2-credit class, and it starts up at the beginning of this month. So head on over to theartofed.com and check out this class. All right, so now to bring on Molly and hear some great ways to make the best of a bad situation. Now, to really pull out all the stops and get all the adages out here, you know what they say about life giving you lemons, right? Hey, Molly, thanks for joining us. So, I like to start out by just kind of setting the scene here. So, it's kind of a multi-part question. How long have you been teaching, and then what sort of big moves and changes have you made? And I'm thinking like different, districts or age groups or anything like that.
So I've actually been teaching about 11 years, and I've been really lucky. I've stayed in the same area, but I've moved schools. So I started out in elementary school teaching kindergarten through 5th grade. And then a few years later, I ended up moving to middle level, which was a big change. And that was 6th through 8th grade. And then most recently, I ended up moving up to high school. And so now I'm teaching at the high school. So I've kind of been at all 3 levels. So that's been a lot of big changes for me.
I know people are going to wonder because I've done everything from, really little kids to even like college kids. Do you have a favorite group so far?
You know what's funny? I kind of love them all for different reasons.
Hmm.
The elementary kids are just so enthusiastic and pumped up and they just love you.
Hmm.
It's a lot of management. Middle level still has that enthusiasm, but they're kind of going through stages where they're trying to figure out who they are, and but they're fun. And high school, the enthusiasm isn't always there. Sometimes you're spending a lot of your time trying to pump them up,
Right.
and they can they can be interesting, they can be rude to you, but I still really love them, and I think I'm kind of meant to be in the high school. I'm feeling like that's my spot.
Well, you're the perfect person to talk to since you've kind of taught all three grades and ages. So one of the things, I've noticed on the Art of Education, whether it's articles or some of the last couple of podcasts we've done, we've really kind of focused on being a brand new teacher, starting off the school year well as, a new teacher, your first year. But you and I, we've both been around the block a few times. I'm wondering, what do you think is tougher if you can think back? Do you think it's tougher being a brand new teacher or being a veteran teacher who's, for whatever reason, inheriting a new situation that's maybe less than ideal and not great?
I do think it was difficult being a new teacher because you kind of had no idea, but you also didn't know what you didn't know. And I think people were so eager to jump in and help. And a lot of schools have mentor systems for new teachers in
Hmm.
place. And people were pretty forgiving. They'd have expectations, but then because they were new, they'd allow you more time or more help. So I gotta go with the veteran teacher moving into a difficult situation. I think is harder because I have preconceived notions or expectations about how things should or could be, and when they're not that way, it's really disappointing. And
Hmm.
I know better, so I want better, and I think it's really hard.
I'm feeling some of this too, and I've felt this in a couple different moves. I mean, I've moved and had, three different jobs. As a new teacher, I think you said it perfectly. You don't know what you don't know. But as a teacher who's been around a while, you can kind of feel like you got to bite your tongue because you're put in this like tough situation. You don't want to be that new person who's like, there's a better way to do this. And then everyone's like, be quiet, new guy, new person.
Right.
Um, but then at the same time, you're a little frustrated because there might be a better way or a better situation to go. Um, it is tough. And I think with every person in every situation, you kind of got to find that balance ground, that mid ground that feels like good for you. Um, one of the things that I think about when people, take on a new situation, a new role is it's kind of like a regime change. And I think a big part of that is classroom management. Maybe the person that you took over for is too tough or too easygoing and too lax. I don't know if you've had any experience with this that you can talk about. I mean, how do you deal with this? If you've got any specific tips for people out there who are kind of going through a similar situation.
It's really tough, especially if you're following a teacher that was there for most of their career, because things are, really set and people are kind of used to the routines. I know following a teacher that is really strict, almost when you come in, if you're not as strict, the students are thinking this is great, because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for a little bit of freedom. But you also have to be careful because if you come in and you're on the other extreme and you're too lax, your other teachers and administration could be looking at you like, what do you got going on down there? Everybody's just
Hmm.
running around. So, but definitely relationship wise with the students, I think it can be fun to follow somebody that was a little more regimented because, I'm a choice teacher and giving students freedom is so much fun to see their just enthusiasm and creativity light up. I've also followed a teacher that was a little bit more lax or like easy going with things. And the students loved that. People could come and go. There were different people in the art room. And it was all fun, but it's really hard to come in then and have some expectations and rules. Right away the students aren't bought in. They're going like, what is this? We had all this freedom and you're trying to take it away from us, and that's a really difficult thing to follow too. So in either situation, you kind of have to watch out and kind of feel out the situation and figure out what you're in.
Right. Well, and I think what you said, the idea of routines that, It really does take time to kind of build up, your expectations, your routine, kind of how you do things, how the kids are getting used to it. And, I'm kind of in now my third job. So my second big kind of shift and move. And, I just feel like that first year for anyone out there who's kind of in a similar boat, this is kind of my moment of giving hope to people is I think that first year is definitely rough because you've got sort of the legacy of the former teacher, and you'll get kids say, well, Miss So-and-so didn't do it that way, or Mr. So-and-so let us do this. And you're just like, sorry, I'm I'm not that person and I do it differently. But then I think after that first year of maybe butting heads a little bit with those sort of classroom management things, it definitely does get better. It just takes a lot of time.
Yeah, I would agree.
I think about this a lot. I've been thinking about it a lot lately that, as a teacher, you kind of have like two parts of what we do. Dealing with students, we kind of talked about, the regime change and dealing with students' expectations and classroom management. But then there's this other thing of like fitting into a new building environment and new teachers and new administrators and maybe even a new community if part of your move was like changing towns. I wonder, and I feel like I'm battling this right now. As a new staff member, how do you navigate that stuff? Are there things that as a veteran teacher, but new to the building, we have to be careful about that maybe, say, a new teacher wouldn't have to worry about?
I think you touched on this a little bit before, but it never looks good when you're the new person coming and telling everyone else that they're doing it wrong. So you have to kind of bite your tongue a little bit because it's very possible that you've seen it done better, somewhere else or a different way. I think it's really good to find a couple things that you think need to be fixed right away and address those with people. Really try to push some other things aside. And even though it's bugging you, wait a little while and kind of give it some time. And even though it's hard to hold back your enthusiasm, you're pumped up and you know how you can make things better. Because you don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be annoying right off the bat and just bugging everybody about everything.
And I gotta say that advice hits me so close to home because I know that I'm that person. And I also logically know that I don't want to be that person. But it's like every time someone asks me how things are going or, how's it going? And I open my mouth and it's just a big old like, well, at my old district, and as I'm saying it, I'm just like, shut up, shut up, shut up. And, and most of the time you're right. I mean, I think it's like usually like little stuff. But yeah, you don't want to be that new veteran teacher that everyone just associates like, all right, he's going to talk about this old district that's like just amazing. And I think as teachers, what's really dangerous is sometimes we look back on maybe a former gig, whether it's, different building, but same district, or maybe it's a whole different district. And we kind of put on like our rose tinted glasses and it's like, oh, it was so amazing. But then you're like, well, was it really? Or were there also like all sorts of like, horrible things that you've kind of forgotten about as you've moved on, And
another thing I always think about too, if you're in a position where it's not ideal and you're really struggling, you can be really short on time. But I think it's really important too to get out and socialize, even though that might be the last thing on your mind. But like, making friends with people in the new building really creates people that are going to understand you and understand kind of what you're working through. And then people will advocate for you. And if you kind of have a pulse on what's going on, if you're out socializing, you'll have a pulse on what's going on. And you can actually that way too find somebody that could kind of be your mentor. And you might think, well, like I'm a veteran teacher, I don't need a mentor, and there's not going to be a mentor program for you, but the mentor needs to help you with the ins and outs of your new situation, your new building, and the things that are going to be different that you might not be aware of.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And even, I remember as a new teacher being placed with a mentor who had nothing to do with art. And it was kind of like, it really was like, here's how you can get a lunch from the cafeteria, and here's where you park, and make sure that you fill out this form by Friday. And it was like, that stuff's nice to have someone tell you, but it wasn't really like, art specific. So I agree. Like if you can get out of the classroom and kind of meet and network. And it's kind of a gross word to say. I felt sleazy saying it for some reason. But kind of like get with people in your building who, you're right, can kind of advocate for you, I think would be really, really helpful. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Tim and I did a podcast a couple weeks ago about negativity and positivity and things that teachers do well and don't do well. And, I really think that complaining without offering up other solutions is just pointless. It's just whining and complaining. So, as a veteran teacher, if you see a better way, don't just say, I don't like this, but it's like, okay, I've noticed this could be a problem and like this would really be a great solution. So at least you are speaking up and it's not just criticism, but it's like criticism with a solution thrown in there as well.
Right.
So I've got a really, really weird question, but you got to bear with me here because I think maybe I'm going to use you as my shrink here and just like I want you to tell me that I'm not weird for having this thought, okay? Because as I've mentioned, I've left jobs and started new jobs, and I think with almost every single job, I've known the person that I've taken over for, either beforehand or maybe afterwards. And I've also almost always met and known and gotten to know the people that have replaced me. And I've noticed this really weird thing happening. I think that as a new person, either consciously or subconsciously, we kind of vilify the former teacher. So like, oh, why did they do it this way? They must not have known what they were doing. They weren't very good. And, I ask this because I've seen people who come in after me and it's like, why do you have all this stuff? I'm not going to use this stuff. And then they throw away everything. And I've been around enough to know like, man, your budget might be cut in a couple of years. You might need that stuff. So do you think there's something where like we feel the need to differentiate ourselves from the person that came before us? So like we kind of like build them up in our mind to be like, I don't know, like the bad guy or the villain in our mind? Or am I just like kooky here?
I think it's just human nature. And I think, like you said, sometimes it's almost subconscious. Because I know that I've done it too. I've done it too. And it almost builds up over time. Like as I'm cleaning out my art room right now and I'm on full-size dumpster number 4, you really feel like you get to know, well, and I actually did know the person that I'm replacing, but you find out more about them each cabinet that you empty. And after a while, you're just thinking like, what is all this stuff? And like, what could this possibly be for? And like the negative thoughts almost just slip in. Mm-hmm. And I've actually been struggling with this lately because, like I said, I know the person that I replaced, and I have almost known the person that I replaced every time. Each person has like amazingly good qualities about them. Mm-hmm. And then there's some things that I see as bad. And then too, like you said, I've met people that have replaced me. In fact, when I moved up to the high school right now, there's a person that replaced me at the middle school, and just like you said, he's going through my cabinets going, what the heck is this? Like, Wiste, right. What do you do with this? So it's kind of funny that I think we only see glimpses of who they were. And I think right. that's why we feel that way, because we don't necessarily always see the good glimpses. We see like their dirty cabinets, and we just hear bits and pieces from students. I think that's it. I think there's good and bad in all of us. And when you find, or when you're moving into somebody's room, you're like digging through their closets, and you find the bad stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I know that as I'm on job number 3, like, I'm definitely now thinking back to the people that I have replaced before, like, in job 1 and job 2. And I'm becoming like a little more like lenient and like, all right, okay, you did things a different way and you had $2,000 worth of feathers and I would never have bought those, but okay, we're going to be all right here. So, right. And then I'm also now maybe wise enough and old enough to think like, oh God, what sort of weird stuff did I leave behind? And, they're probably cursing at me. The last job I left, I really tried to like, okay, I don't think this guy's going to want all this stuff. It's kind of weird. So I'll try to take it out. But then you never know, maybe they're as weird and kooky as you are in exactly the same way and they'll want the same stuff. So it's kind of a no-win situation, I guess. But I think what you said, I think is really great. You're kind of getting just glimpses of the people And yeah, I mean, I think for people out there who are, inheriting a less than ideal situation and they know that there's a better way to, like you said, don't maybe let that negativity creep in and just realize that there's, this is only snippets of what that person was really all about.
You know what's funny too? The person that I just replaced, I actually worked with them for a lot of years and they were kind of my mentor. And
Hmm.
we actually got to have a conversation before he left and we talked about, he was there 30 plus years. He was a beloved teacher. He knew that he was very lenient, like open door policy with everything, whatever it was. And he kind of felt bad because we were talking about how rough my year was going to be, like
Mm,
replacing him the first year, and he knew it. He was like, Wisty, I know you're going to have it rough.
hmm.
But it also wasn't going to change who he was.
Right.
So, but it was fun to have that connection, that conversation. So,
So that brings up something I've actually kind of thought about the last job that I left. And as I thought about transitioning, because, you get to care for your kids and love your kids so much. It sounds like this teacher that you replaced was actually kind of thinking about, his legacy or the next person. Have you ever kind of thought about the person that replaces you and like what sort of qualities you'd want them to have so that they're not so radically different that then they're just like inheriting just a horrible experience, if that makes any sense? Like maybe trying to find someone who's at least close to you so it'll be kind of like a similar kind of experience.
right. That's a good question. That's an interesting question too. And I'm kind of in the trenches right now of trying to figure out, I'm like treading water, trying to figure out how to survive this first year and this huge change. So I haven't thought about it too much. But
Hmm.
when when they were interviewing to find a person for this position, the retiring teacher wasn't involved in the interviews, and I kind of wondered
Mm.
maybe he should have been. You know?
Yeah, to make sure that kind of it was a smooth transition. I mean, I've thought about that. Like if I were to leave, I mean, the art teaching community is small enough, especially, locally where we might live and work. And you're just like, okay, I bet this person and this person and this person are all going to apply for the job. And boy, this person is a really great teacher, but man, their style and outlook is so different from mine that they're going to walk into a less than ideal situation because they're so different when it comes to classroom management or outlook on things that, boy, they just might not be a really good fit. So,
Right.
so let's, I kind of want to take kind of like a big final summary picture of this thing. We've walked into a less than ideal situation. Things are maybe going to be a little rough. I mean, do we just take kind of comfort in the fact that it's just going to take time and that as veteran teachers, we know we're going to get it worked out? Or are we keeping those resumes handy because we're like looking for a better situation down the road?
I would say it depends a lot on different circumstances. Like, I was just saying this room that I just inherited 4 dumpsters later, I was in there all summer and I'm still like cleaning the place out. Uh it's been rough. Like it really has. And it's taken a toll on me, but and also, I have the teacher who's a really tough act to follow and it's a big
Hmm.
transition. But I really the staff and the administration have been so supportive. My administration was like, "What do you need? We'll pay you to work on curriculum this summer.
Hmm.
We can do something to get you some time in the art room." They've gotten me supplies, materials, paid for all these dumpsters. And the staff has been so supportive. A lot of them have said to me, even though the last teacher was beloved and they all had good relationships with that teacher, they said they know that it would be really tough to follow him. So they're supportive and they kind of know what I'm going through. And I also really like the community that my school's in.
Hmm.
And so I'm kind of vested. I'm going to
Yeah.
stick it out. But if you didn't have that staff, admin, community support, uh, and you had the room with the 4 dumpsters and you're treading water because it's a tough
Yeah.
transition, I don't know, I might be looking elsewhere. So I think that other support is what is important when you're in a bad situation.
Yeah, that's really important. We were kind of joking off mic that we wish that our communities or our schools were close to each other, because you inherited a classroom kind of overflowing with stuff and materials, and you've had to purge, and I kind of inherited a classroom where literally my cupboards were bare, and it's like, oh, Molly, I wish I could take all the junk you're throwing away from you.
I know, right?
That'd be pretty pricey, though, to ship it from like Minnesota to Iowa. So
I know.
Oh, well, things didn't work out. But hey, Molly, before we go, do you have any last minute tips for anyone out there listening who is maybe kind of, like us, dealing with a less than ideal sort of new gig out there?
Some of this could be a repeat, but just to make sure, definitely ask for help. Like I said, my administration and my teachers have donated stuff to me for organization. My administration got me paid time, dumpsters, and they're just always, giving me that pat on the back, like, it's going to be okay. Like, you'll get through this. And then even though you're a veteran teacher, find a mentor that you trust. Like, go out and do that socializing and figure out kind of who you get along with, who you think you can talk to, and find somebody that you trust to really help you, know the ropes. And it's nice if you can have somebody advocate for you. Like I have a new teacher that I meet with right now, and when he's in a tough situation, I go to admin and I say, hey, you need to help this guy out. So he doesn't have to do that. So you need somebody to advocate for you. And then the last thing is just that change is really hard for everybody. Once in a while, I have to think about, my students might be hurting because they miss their teacher, and we'll have a relationship eventually, but right now they might be lashing out at me because not so much because I'm more strict maybe, but because they miss their teacher that they've had for years and years. So I have to stop and think once in a while, even though I'm struggling, that I need to build relationships with those students. And I keep trying to make sure that I share my heart with them and tell them why. Like, why am I more strict? Why am I making them do digital portfolios when they've never done it before? And, if they understand who I am and they know my heart and they know my story, they're going to come around and we're going to be okay. And we're going to have a relationship too. And someday they won't want me to leave.
Very well put. Well, hey, Molly, thanks for coming on. And man, we're going to make it through this year, and then we're going to laugh at, our rough sort of first couple of weeks of this new transition for us.
I hope so.
All right. Take care. Have a great rest of the year.
You too.
All right. I hope that talk between Molly and I inspired and informed you if you're also finding yourself in a less than great situation. There's lots of little things that you can do, but I think the two big pieces of the puzzle, number one, don't be afraid or too proud to ask for help. And secondly is, it's just going to take some time. As veteran teachers, we know we can change the direction of this ship. It's just going to take time. And before you know it, you'll look back on this first rocky period with some humor. I mean, what doesn't kill you is only bound to make you stronger, right? Art Ed Radio is developed, produced, and supported by the Art of Education with audio engineering by Michael Crocker. For fans of the podcast out there, do us a favor and give us a ranking or positive review on iTunes, as this is totally what helps us find new listeners when they type in art and education into whatever podcast listening app they're using. This totally helps spread our message and our show. As always, new episodes of Art Ed Radio will be released every Tuesday, and additional content can be found under the podcast tab on theartofed.com. All right, thanks for listening.